We can recalibrate someone's frequency around wealth within 90 minutes, where we'll go through every experience as it's related to the subconscious mind, the family's relationship to wealth, their relationship to wealth, the present relationship to wealth. And then
Yes.
as it's all experienced, we can then activate this new timeline. So what tends to happen is there's a collapsing of the existing ceiling for wealth. So for instance, I had someone who came in, was like, oh, I want to create $4.5 million in the next 2 years, but the subconscious belief was money is poverty. Within an
Right.
hour, they saw money as wealth, and then $100 million vision came in for the next 5 years.
Power and Purpose podcast. I am Vanessa Soul, your host. Thank you so much for investing your time and your energy into listening to today's episode. Today's guest is Sam Kukathas, founder of Soul Purpose Leaders, creator of Neuro Resonance Optimization, guiding purpose-led leaders into deep coherence to embody their vision. Sam, thank you so much for being here on the show.
It is such a pleasure, Vanessa. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Who are you and who are you not?
Great question. I would say what comes to mind in this moment in time is that I'm someone who's infinitely curious. Everything that I do is really driven by this kind of curiosity and playful intuition. So, and who I'm not is someone who is in a box. I'm not someone who likes to play by the rules. I'm not someone who likes to do things in a very rigid and structured way. I like to really allow like my own consciousness, my own kind of channeling to come through in every aspect of my life to guide me in terms of how I operate in the world.
I love that. You're not the type of person to be put in a box. And I love that you embrace that and you acknowledge it. And I think self-awareness, one of the reasons why I love this question is we might make choices and decisions to be a certain person or to not be a certain person. But when we pour in more self-awareness to that, like I'm sure you probably come up there's reminders that come in or there's those temptations to box yourself in, right, to niche down, or like I don't know what box might come your way, but the fact that you are raising this awareness today in this conversation, and probably I'm sure you probably do this on your own. It really does make a difference. It allows us to be so intentional. So, my listeners and myself, I'm just so inspired by this question and all the different ways that we could answer it. So, thank you for that. So, let's
My
talk a
pleasure.
little bit about your background before we like dive into all the juicy stuff for today.
Sure.
Um, Tell us about your doctoral submission and rejection and that whole identity collapse.
Absolutely. So at the time, I was writing a doctorate in law at Oxford in legal philosophy, and I was 6 years in when I submitted it in 2017, and I was not in a good space mentally when I submitted it already. And then when I actually submitted it, I didn't actually receive it, and that was like the complete collapsing of my identity at the time because my father's an academic. I wanted to kind of live into those footsteps. I had ambitions of being a professor at the time, and this was the only thing that I knew myself to be good at. I had a kind of a narrow view of who I was, and it was like, if I'm not an academic, then who am I? And so there was a sense of like Sam has disappeared. So at that moment in time, it was just like, well, if I'm not this, then why am I even here? And so that was like the level of the darkness that I guess I was experiencing at that moment.
Mm. How did it feel? Is it disorienting? Is it just like hopelessness? Is it just confusion? Like, what was there a main vibration? Was there a mix of energies there beside what you already
Oh
described?
yeah, there was so many. There was like I think failure, shame, and guilt were the predominant ones that I felt. My parents had invested a lot of money into me doing grad school, probably at least £100,000, I'm guessing. It didn't cover my scholarships, didn't cover anything like that. And I also just internally, I was someone who was always looking to fulfill my potential, and I was feeling like I wasn't living up to it. Like people would, knew me as this guy, the Hume guy at parties. Like they might go to a party once, and a year later they'd see me again. Like, oh, you're the guy who was talking about David Hume for for all night. So like I was someone who's extremely passionate about what I did until I wasn't. So it was really so much of the lens in which I saw life was from the lens of this 18th century Scottish philosopher. So it was a crushing of everything I knew at that time as an adult.
Wow. And then what was the turning point?
Sure. Like for me, I stepped into a personal development seminar, and that really was a turning point very quickly because it was very philosophically grounded, and I started to see like where my perception of who I was got created, and I saw that it was BS. And as soon as I saw it was BS, I was able to really be with like, oh, this light that used to be here is actually rekindling. And I never really went back to the darkness, which was pervasive, and the pessimism, which was really pervasive, especially as a philosopher. After that, I was just really looking at all the different possibilities, not just for humanity but for myself.
Mm, I love that. And were there any other tools or maybe even specific tools, like maybe medicine journeys or anything that might have helped you during that personal development period?
For sure. Like I kind of went through, I did a lot of training with Landmark as a kind of my foundation.
Oh, landmark.
And yeah, and then I went into coaching, did transformational leadership, consultancy. And then eventually I did a plant medicine journey, which really opened up something way beyond the cognitive mind. So all of my skill set, if you like, was built around the intellect until I did this plant medicine journey. And when I did that, that opened up something in a much more embodied way, which I wasn't really anticipating.
And what was it?
Well, there was a lot. Essentially, I had written 2 pages of intentions down. It was a psilocybin MDMA journey. And everything that I wrote down came up, both in terms of what there was to clear and everything that I wanted to create. So I remember just like going through memories and almost like just experiencing it, going, all right, next, and then experience it next, as if it was just, yeah, it was empty and meaningless is actually the words that came through at the time, funnily enough. And then I went to this space of creation. And I remember very clearly that what happened is the very first person that came in my awareness was the then Prime Minister of England, Boris Johnson. So I was having a conversation in my awareness, not in reality. I also have to preface that with the Prime Minister, talking to him about his father, Stanley Johnson. And then from there, all these different figures came in, transformational leaders, Landmark themselves came in, an energy healer slash business coach, and I'd done some of this guy's business coaching. I think some family people came in. And then the biggest message really was, you're here to heal all the bullshit in the world. And I heard that message 50 times over. And all of this time I was speaking in a voice, which is, to my estimate, was 100 times louder than I normally speak. So it was booming through me. It was very animalistic, I guess, if you would say. But that was the moment where I thought, oh, maybe I'm a healer. And so that was the turning point.
I love it. And that voice that you mentioned, was that like a channeling gift coming through? Was that you? I mean, I think that channeling is us in my perspective, but other
Sure.
people do it differently. Any insight on that really quickly?
Yeah, like I guess it was a kind of channel at the time. I just didn't really know what it was, and I wasn't really worried either. I was just allowing everything that wanted to come through from this space of clearing. It's that idea you get to nothing, and then that's where you can create. So that's really how I saw it at the time. It's just like, okay, there's nothing in my way in this moment, so I can now just unleash, and that's what happened.
Beautiful. I love that. I love hearing about everyone's journeys. I recognize pieces of mine and yours and similarities and also very, differences and contrasts. So it's kind of like, yeah, when we just allow and we trust, it's like, yes, our journey could be similar to other people's that we might hear like on podcasts like this, but also there's so much uniqueness too. And so I love that. Thank you for sharing it. What is neuro resonance optimization?
Sure. So we break it down into 3 components. So when we're talking about neuro, we're really talking about the subconscious mind. When we're talking about resonance, it's like, well, there are certain people, there are certain ideas which resonate in your world. There's certain music you might hear. It's like, oh, you might really love Slipknot, but you might really hate classical music. So that Slipknot's resonating with you, classical music's not. So the same is kind of true when it comes to our life. There are things which are resonating, which we want to create, and then we're able to easily obtain it. There are things which are not resonating, so we're actually struggling to be able to experience what it is we want. So what I'm doing is I'm basically helping people create whatever it is they want that's aligned with them. And alignment's really important into this aspect, because the ego can have an idea of what we want, and then alignment will tell us whether it's actually for us. but we're going into the subconscious mind of what is in the way of that creation. And then I'm using vocal resonance through my voice to be able to tune in to what the emotions are that are stored within their cells that are in the way of them being able to have what they want. So we're clearing any distortion through vocal resonance, creating a transmutation of that energy. And once there is a transmutation of that energy, the energy can come into another form. And that's where we're activating this deeper frequency of love, which actually activates this higher level of intelligence at a cellular level. And so it's like tapping into what we call a 0 point field or a unified field of consciousness. And then we can help you remember who you truly are from that place. So we can use it for both vision creation, but also just for optimizing any area of life.
And I love that this is like a subconscious process. I'm such a fan of the subconscious mind. What does this look like? Do you have any examples, or I could always give you like a theme that comes to mind, and you could use that as an example to let me know.
Sure, like well, I can show you, if you want, or I can, you can tell me what more you would like.
Yeah, like, well, what's a common challenge? Most of us love and money. Most of us are, we have those goals, and sometimes we
Yeah,
feel like we're not reaching our potential there. So, like, let's just say someone is looking for their life partner, or
sure.
or they're on that path. They have that intention. I'm sure you probably had that already. What would be a few of the steps on how this neuro resonance optimization process would work with that type of intention or goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we look at the crystalline intention that someone wants to bring through. So the clarity of the intention is going to be important. And then we're going to look at, well, what are the fears, the recurring thoughts, the different concerns that are showing up, which you feel are in the way of you actually being able to already have this partner right now, right? And then we're experiencing what that looks like. So, if I'm doing what I call a quantum activation, which is these really deep experiences, almost like a psychedelic journey, then what's happening is we're moving space by space. If we're doing the shorter journeys, what we call the frequency of you, then what we're doing is we're just looking at the number one block that you see is in the way, essentially, and finding where it locates within the body. And then, the way it starts is that essentially we call through that intention through sound. So imagine a sound which will come from below the crust of the earth. So it's a really bass kind of sound. And then it's going to gradually go higher and higher in resonance until it hits like this crescendo, which sometimes people say is like higher than Mariah Carey in terms of the peak of the notes, right? Which you probably wouldn't expect coming from this voice, right? But and then that's our like starting point to really see like what's already happening, because what will happen is one of two things. Either there'll be a space of elevation that opens up straight away for people, or there'll be a space of some sort of tension or constriction that will show itself in the body. So if there's the constriction, we'll go straight into that constriction. If there's pure elevation, we'll go into where the block is and we'll look at where it's located within the body. And really, it's about experiencing the experience. So it's really allowing all of these different parts of us to be welcome. So if there's a part that didn't feel loved, for instance, when it comes to a relationship, let's find the source of where that comes from. Is it coming from your lifetime? Is it coming from beyond that, right? It could be a combination of things. So we want to experience all of the different parts which are making up this experience in the present, which are in the way of you being safe to have that partner now.
Wow. And is it always a sound frequency that you're using, or is that just one of the tools with this process?
Sure. So the sound frequency is the central component, because what we're looking is going beyond language. So sometimes people will say to me, that sound came from the beginning of time, or this sound took me back into the caveman times. Now, I can't verify their experience, obviously, but these aren't things that they normally say, right? They tap into something which is pre-verbal, which is their cells are just responding to, or it takes them into a space like, oh, that's in Egypt, that sound, or I've heard that in another life, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So my role is just to guide them into experiencing what's there so that they can actually activate what wants to be remembered and who they truly are.
Yeah. Wow. That is incredible. And just for the listeners, I'm pretty sure you're explaining it great. And a lot of the listeners also know about light language, right? And so
Mm,
I think it's the same premise here. It's like that sound, the frequency will bypass the conscious mind, you know, go to the subconscious, do what it needs to do, and heart, breath, soul, I don't know, all the things. So I'm just like I'm amazed at this because like I've done so many healing modalities as a practitioner for
Yeah,
clients. We've received a lot um, as the receiver as well.
yeah.
And this just feels so different. And yeah, do you have people who might have done hypnosis or they might have done other subconscious integration practices and do they have any insight that they give you on how this is different, or do you have any insight on how this might be different than some of those other ones?
Yeah, so I think the kind of just normal experience is like this is different to anything anyone's ever experienced before, regardless of whether they've done sound frequency, psychedelics, hypnosis, energy healing, breath work. Like it's different. Like people think, oh, I know resonance, and then they go, actually, I didn't. So whatever people think it is, it's usually very different to what it actually is in reality. I've had NFL players who would say like, oh, I thought this was like sound healing and it was soft, but actually when I heard your voice, it penetrated through my soul. So
They didn't expect that, yeah.
yeah, that was in Antarctica. That was an interesting one. So it's an experience which it tends to be something which people like remember for a very long time. And sometimes people say like, oh, your life will never be the same on the other side of this,
Hmm.
because we're really collapsing time. If we're going to these really deep quantum activations, what's literally happening is we're looking to go across all these different timelines so that, wealth creation is a really beautiful one. Like we can recalibrate someone's frequency around wealth within, 90 minutes, where we'll go through every experience as it's related to the subconscious mind, the family's relationship to wealth, their relationship to wealth, the present relationship to wealth. And then
Yes.
as it's all experienced, we can then activate this new timeline. So what tends to happen is there's a collapsing of the existing ceiling for wealth. So for instance, I had someone who came in was like, oh, I want to create $4.5 million in the next 2 years, but the subconscious belief was money is poverty. Within an
Right.
hour, they saw money as wealth, and then $100 million vision came in for the next 5 years.
That's an interesting limiting belief there. Haven't heard of that one yet. Wow, and I love the results. Yeah, and that's I might be coming to you because my wealth journey, it's been moving, but very slow. You know.
No worries, I'm here for it if you need it.
Yeah, I love it. And this is just so fascinating because it's like, there's so many different tools out there and integration practices and healing. And I interchange the word healing and integration. Sometimes I feel like it could be the same thing. But yeah, this just allows us to really explore like what's going to work for us at different times of our lives. So I love that. And it kind of feels like it just collapses this gap between who we are, our current frequency that might include our challenges or our blocks, and who we believe we can be or the potential that we know we have. Because if we didn't have the potential, like that person, I forgot the number you just said, was it 4.5 million?
Yeah,
Yeah, if they didn't have the potential for that, they probably wouldn't have even had that desire, right? So it's like there
for
was so
sure.
much truth there. But I love this process, and especially that person with those types of results, is it's like it collapsed that gap or that the timelines or the challenges. Any other thoughts on that? Am I explaining that correctly?
The collapse time in terms of the clearing the ceilings, but then it's also the collapsing time in terms of what does it actually take to make that happen in reality, so you can bring it through in material reality. And it's like if you can process all of these different experiences, then things basically speed up so that the version of you that already exists out there in an energetic field can be activated. And one of the parts of the process that I developed is essentially I then activate, once you've cleared everything, you activate the version so they're already experiencing a version of them which has had it. And then what tends to happen is visions start to expand. So it's kind of like visualization on steroids for them.
Hmm, powerful. So powerful. Are you able to do this for yourself? I'm curious, or does or does someone else do this for you?
Well, before we jumped on the podcast, what I did just to kind of clear myself was to just tone a few notes and then hit the kind of the highest crescendo, and that will just kind of create a clearing in my field, in the room. So it just feels like it's more like crystalline and pristine, the energy in the space. So that's a very simple way that I can do it. But does it have the same impact, at least at this time in my life, as if I'm working with someone? No.
Okay.
I use it some of my own medicine in different ways, and for an app that I've developed and other things, but it doesn't take me as deep as other people go.
Okay, I could totally relate to that because when I do light language for myself, it definitely moves the energy, right? But it's not like this, there's a limitation to the depth or the receptivity that I can access in that moment. But when I'm receiving someone else's light language or any other sound frequency or any other sound medicine, I totally relate. Like you could just go deeper, probably because you're surrendering more when someone else is in that collaboration with you.
Yeah, I think so. Like I'm going to record at a studio tomorrow, so I'm excited to see whether or not what we create from that will be like a shift in my dimension of receiving my own frequency. But I'm open to it can expand in deep ways. It's expanded over the last year or so, and what I find is what happens to me is because the frequencies are hitting what the neuroscience have told me, the emotional centers of the brain. For me, at least, what happens is every time I listen to what's called unlock flow, it'll basically just my eyes will start to water and there'll be this releasing which is happening. And I don't even know why it's happening, but it's always this sort of restoration which is going on.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. Amazing. And is there any other insight on this particular practice, this integration tool? Um, yeah, any other wisdom to share about that before I go into some more questions for you?
No, I think let's move on. I think
Yeah. Okay. And thank you for like I feel like yeah, it was short and sweet, but it's just like there's a resonance in even our conversation about the resonance. What is it called? The neural
Neuro
resonance.
Resonance
Like even the
Optimization.
energy of what we're talking about is still here. It's still like landing for everyone and myself. So I love that. So I love to talk about this paradigm shift, and you let me know if you believe in it or not. But
Yeah,
I would love to get your opinion. Do you believe that we're going through a paradigm shift right now?
well, 100%. Like, for me, kind of, I channel through and words will channel through. And I remember a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, I remember like writing on LinkedIn, like, this is a tipping point for humanity in 2025. So that was just the space in which I was seeing. And I've had experiences which have basically told me, like, I've been guided since I was a little boy by my imagination, and that was like my connection to source.
Mm.
And so now I now listen to my imagination from a different standpoint than I used to, which is like, oh, I've got a good imagination. Whereas no, this is guidance. So when I'm speaking through something and it's just coming through without me trying to think about it, I tend to think more and more, okay, this is actually meant to be what comes through.
Yeah, beautiful. And how do you see the paradigm shift from your perspective? Some people see it as like we're all moving from, masculine energy into a more feminine energy. Some people see it as just like from corruption to more like integrity wealth or conscious wealth or something like that. So, yeah, do you have any thoughts on how you see this shift, how you define it for yourself or not define it?
Sure, I don't think I define it as such. I think I just see it as more like there's a waking up that's happening more and more
Mhm.
around the world. There's more and more people who you wouldn't expect. Like for instance, tomorrow, the sound studio that I'm going to, I'm talking about channeling. The guy's like, I love Abraham Hicks, so he's like, that's really cool that you'll be channeling in the studio. Rather than it being like, oh, what the hell are you talking about? It's like he's already speaking the same language as I am, right? So I think that's an aspect of it. Yesterday, I was working with a chef, and he was experiencing like all of these experiences just disappear and all these colors in his eyes and like things and shapes going and moving. And like he'd said he'd never experienced anything like it before, but I had no idea that that was going to be so receptive. Like I knew from the first sound it was going to be receptive, but before then I was just like, well, this guy's a chef. Like, how do I know whether it's going to be? So people surprise me more and more in terms of the level of receptivity for this kind of work. So I think the world is ready for every kind of weird thing there is out there under the sun, and people are already going and exploring that. Whether it's going on a psychedelic journey as a kind of their wake up thing, or whether it's going introduced to breath work, whether it's energy healing, whether it's Joe Dispenza, whether it's resonance, whatever it is, people are starting to find like there's something out there for them which is calling them, and then they're responding to that. Now, are there still lots of people who are not in that space? Absolutely. But the more that there is a tipping point, the more that's going to allow for a shift in the vibration of the planet, is my belief.
I love that perspective. I love it. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And any practical tips for listeners for any type of like first steps to take, something, I don't know if it's something they could do on their own or looking into more of this, and then we'll get into like what you offer a little bit, but like just some
Yeah, yeah.
practical advice for the listeners.
Yeah, like I think there's some really simple things that you can do. So one thing which I think is super valuable to try and bring more resonance into your voice is there's a great video by Jonathan Goldman on YouTube, and it's just like a 7 minutes of chakra toning, and essentially what that does is it's clearing the chakras. So often I used to practice or get my clear my aura by doing these tones of different vowel sounds before I would work with people. And I've done this on a very odd occasion where I had a very late night and I needed to really like clear before I was going to be working with someone. And so I remember like doing two rounds of that, and by the end, like there was just no issue with the voice at all. It was like it was really clean. So that's a simple one that you can go on YouTube and find that. The other one that I like to do more and more is really just allowing myself to connect in with the heart. So, obviously HeartMath is great for that. And they've got their apps, I think, around coherence, which I would recommend. And basically, it's just allowing that heart focused breathing where, you're closing your eyes and then you're just imagining that the breath is coming from the heart space rather than just from the gut. And the more you're focusing on something which creates that loving presence, the more you can connect in with it. One of the easiest things that I learned, I think, was really this: if you can connect in with a frequency of love, like when I work with people, whether I'm asking them to connect in with a part of themselves which hasn't experienced that love, or whether it's just the feeling of love, depending on where they are in their journey, every single person is able to tap into some version. Even if their heart is closed, they're still able to tap into love for something or some
Yes.
experience. Sometimes it's actually not love, it's peace. So whatever that is, if you're wanting to shift in the moment, the quickest thing you can do is just basically anchor in where is a feeling, something when you create a feeling of love. Dog, children, wife, spouse, husband, what have you. Or if it's not that, your football team, being in the ocean, being on your own, whatever it is that is for you, just allow yourself to experience that. The body will remember it more and more, and you will start to feel more grounded and you'll start to feel more love.
I love that. And I love that you're mentioning love as the anchor. And there was a moment in my life where I was probably that closed off person. Like heart was like locked, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
5 different barriers. No one could get in, except for the dog that I had at the time.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I remember being in a breath work, or I don't know where I was. I was in some
Mm.
type of ceremony, and that was the thing that I was able to connect to, was that unconditional love for my dog. And my perspective at the time was that that was the first time I had felt that unconditional love, and it was such an important part of my life. And so I love that you mentioned that: kids, dog, ocean, football team. And I feel like even if you don't do these tips that Sam is offering, I think that's just a powerful practice in general. Like even after this podcast or throughout the week, you could just really connect to a love frequency. And I think that's just a good tip for life. And any other closing reflections, any other words of wisdom or a powerful quote? And then we'll go into how people can connect with you and one thing that you're offering.
Sure. Like, I think one thing I'd say is that there's a lot of people who want to get into flow, right? And we often think that flow is something which is created through more action, right? And that is one way to create flow. But there's actually a lot easier way to create flow, and that's actually to build ease first. So you do it at a cellular level, and we're able to essentially activate what's blocking this flow. If there's a central column here, if there's any tension, it can't flow, right? If your voice doesn't resonate, there's something blocking the flow. So we want to look at like, okay, well, how do we actually unlock that, right? And I can talk about that in a sec, or I can talk about that now if you like. But that's what I would say, is that we want to recalibrate the way in which we think flow has to be about more doing, because that's actually the forceful figuring it out way that, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a faster route if you want that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. And so check the description box below because you can connect with Sam through his links. His website is there, his Instagram and Facebook. And how can people work with you?
Sure, like we have applications for people to work with us on our the website, the Soul Purpose Leaders website. But then more generally, we created something recently, which is really to unlock, well, eventually billions to be able to experience their own resonance, to be able to come into coherence. And that's what's called Resonance OS. And so it starts with a journey of unlocking flow and vitality in your cells within 15 minutes. And then the game plan basically is over time to transmute any challenge to the human condition. So that's what we're going to look to bring into this so that we can move from self to systemic to create, collective harmony across the planet.
Wow. And is that the app? Or
That's
is
the
it?
app. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is so good. Like I just thank you for offering this to the collective. Like this, I feel like it's perfect time. I feel like there's so much receptivity for something like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for everything that you do, Sam. Thank you for your time, for coming on the show. And yeah, we will wrap up. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Namaste. Have a great day.